Good morning, Illini. Welcome back to another Healthy Illini podcast. I am Matt Schrock, your host, as always. And today we're jumping into a topic that I really wanted to talk about, but it is a sometimes not as easy a topic to discuss. And so I'm really excited to have this opportunity to have this conversation, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. Today, I'm joined by three guests. First up, we have Chris Lofton. He is a counselor from the Counseling Center here at UIUC, has his master's in social work, and is also LCSW. He is also the co-chair of the Suicide Prevention Outreach Team. Chris, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm also joined by Todd Johnson from the Counseling Center. She's a senior here at UIUC with a major in psychology, and she's one of the Counseling Center's paraprofessionals. Aaliyah, appreciate you coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And a return guest to the program, we have Jackie Beard. She is a licensed clinical psychologist here at McKinley. She was one of our first guests way back about a year ago. But Jackie, I really appreciate you coming back.
Glad to be back, Matt.
Okay, so the topic we're talking about is suicide and suicidal thoughts. And that can be a difficult topic to discuss. I think we all acknowledge that. And there's some stigma around that and some hesitancy and things like that. But one of the best ways to break a stigma is to talk about it. And so that's why I wanted to have this conversation today. But it's not just talking about here in a podcast or at some special meeting or some clinical setting to do educational type things like that, but just anywhere, whether in your dorm room, as you're walking around the quad, over a meal, whatever it may be, over social media and conversing with someone through text or something like that, just talking about it is a really big key. And it's important to create safe spaces when we talk about it, where we can express thoughts or talk about if we are struggling. And so that's really where I wanted to start here today. I'm just going to ask you straight out, why is this such a vital topic, especially on a college campus like UIUC?
First of all, I think it's really important to point out that suicide is the second leading cause of death for college students. And I know that can be, scary to hear, but, it's important to kind of, say that because it normalizes that this happens. In terms of thoughts of suicide, like 1 in 5 students report that, and that's something that studies show. So it's a common experience. However, for some reason, we don't feel comfortable talking about it. I think that's stigma, and that's exactly why we're doing stuff like this right now.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like suicide can be really hard to talk about. And I think even now in our generation, it's so easy to joke about trying to commit suicide or I'm going to attempt suicide so easily that it's just it's a joke now. And when somebody says it seriously, it can be perceived as a joke because of the fact that it's so normalized as a joke and not a serious topic that should be talked about, especially when you feel alone and you're trying to tell someone and they're like, oh, you must be joking about it, when you're not really, when you're actually really struggling. It can be really hard.
The part you talk about a joke, I mean, just as a quick example of that, there's an entire, if you're on TikTok, there's an entire TikTok thing with a gentleman who's laughing and he acts like he's going to jump over the balcony. He's laughing, he's actually going to drink some bleach. It's a joke. It is, and they're talking about a situation, and that can make it difficult to have that serious conversation because of that. And one of the other things that really on this campus, and I think, Jackie, we talked about this before, is that there's a real imposter syndrome issue that students look around and say, well, I'm the only one dealing with this. I'm the only one thinking about this. Everyone else is doing fine. And that's really not the case.
No, it's really not the case. I mean, we see students every day, all the time coming in with suicidal thoughts. And I think one of the things of why it's hard to talk about, and I've had students say this in my office before, is I know my friend is struggling, but I don't even know what to say. I don't know how to bring it up. I don't know how to ask them. I don't want to make it worse. I'm worried that if I bring it up to them, that it's going to worsen those thoughts, or they're going to actually do something if I bring it up.
And that's really the second part of this, because the first part of it is talking. We want to make sure that if you're listening, or anyone we talk to, is that it's not, I don't want to say it's common, but it's common. It's not a unique thing, and that a lot, like you said, Chris said it, 1 in 5 students report having those suicidal thoughts. It's it's something that does happen, and a lot of us deal with, especially in places of high stress, of high expectation, of high competition, and that's what a college campus is, especially here at UIUC. We know that this is a very competitive campus in a lot of majors, and that can make it really tough. And when you are struggling, you just feel like, I don't know what to do. And so from the person who is feeling that, it's important not to feel judged. But judgment comes from outside. It comes internally too. We judge ourselves. I mean, often, if I asked all of us to write down 10 things we liked about ourselves versus 10 things that we didn't like is a whole lot easier to do. We're our own worst critics. We know that. But it's important not to feel judged. And it's a two-way street. So while we're talking about the person who, it is very common to have those thoughts, I really do want to talk about the other half, being the listener, because that is hard. Because, you can't talk about a subject without having two parties. There's a give and take. So for those of us, and I think most of us want to support our friends and help our friends and anyone we know who's struggling, but we do feel unprepared and we feel inadequate for that discussion. So from all of you, what advice or tools do you have for anyone who's listening who might be that side of the conversation, the listener, the supporter? What should they know?
Well, they should definitely know that research indicates you are not going to increase a person's suicidal thoughts from just asking them, checking in with them, asking them, are you thinking about killing yourself? Are you thinking about doing something to end your life? That you are not going to make it worse or increase those thoughts simply by asking. In fact, by asking, and it shows that somebody cares enough to ask and that somebody's willing to listen, which can make such a huge difference to people struggling.
Also, I think another thing that holds people back is like people think that they're like, well, what if my friend gets in trouble? What if they get sent off somewhere? I always like to say I'm a triage clinician. I see emergency walk-ins. That's what I do. I see walk-ins all the time. And if we, had to send off somebody every time they had thoughts of suicide, just thoughts, we'll be sending everybody to the hospital. And that's just not what we do. We can't do that. Just because you're having thoughts of suicide doesn't mean that you automatically get hospitalized. Now, if you feel like you're unsafe with yourself, if you feel like you might go through with it, might attempt, that's when we start looking at those options. And even then, it's something based off care and not you kind of getting in trouble. So it's really important to kind of realize that. And that might make it easier to suggest like, hey, maybe you might want to talk to a counselor if we kind of demystify some of that fear that our friend's going to get sent off.
And I think an important thing to jump in here, and I from talking to all of you and from all the people I've talked to about mental health, it's important to know that if that does come to that point where you need to be sent off to care, it's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because we want to help. It's not from a judgment standpoint that, oh, you're failing, oh, you're doing something wrong, oh, you're messed up, whatever the thoughts are that why I won't tell anybody because they'll think that. It's we want to help you, and this is the best way to help you for the point that you're at right now. Would you agree with all that?
Oh, yeah, and even down with the process of being hospitalized. Like for our students, it's like, okay, well, make sure that you're telling them to sign a release of information to ODO so that they're contacting your professors and making sure that you're not getting in trouble for, like, oh, I missed an exam or I missed the paper or something. So you can focus on yourself. That's the whole idea is you focusing on your care, because sometimes it's like you have all these responsibilities and it's like, how can I take some time to just focus on myself a little bit, reevaluate what I need to do, and then come back with a new plan. And I think the main thing about U of I is like we want to make sure that students are striving and succeeding. And part of that is talking to the counseling center, talking about your options. The earlier you come talk to not just us, even Office of Dean of Students, McKinley, Disability Resource Educational Service Center. There's so many resources out there that students can tap into for support, and that they're already paying for. We're all student fee based. It's already paid for, so I like to say that rather than it's free. I like, you paid for it already. It's not free. So, right. I can go on.
Well, we will, and we'll have a lot of these resources that we're talking about in the bio of this episode. We always list resources, and there's a lot connected to mental health and suicide and things like that. So you can find that there. We're going to highlight a few. We'll come back to that a little bit later in the conversation. But you're right. There's a lot of resources there for students, and it's not just it's not just seeing a professional, which is an important key. But, you know, when we start talking mental health, we start talking, you know, taking care of yourself. It doesn't necessarily mean only that you're seeing a therapist. There's a lot of things you can do on your own. There's a lot of things you can do for your own mental health. And again, we'll come to the resources at the end. And some of that, those things you can do. But I do want to highlight that part, that for someone who's feeling like, you know, I don't really feel like I'm at that point where I'm ready to talk to a professional, or I don't feel like I need to necessarily yet, but I want to do something. There's in between. It's not, you know, it's not one or the other. There's a whole spectrum of stuff that you can do. But before we get there, I digress. I want to back up a little bit, and I do want to talk about the person who's listening. What basically warning signs, or, you know, indicators. We talked a little bit about the joking, Leah, you brought that up. That's one thing. But what are some of the things that, if you're hanging out with your friends and you're noticing these particular or some of these types of things, it might be the start of a warning sign of something you might want to watch out for?
One warning sign can be like withdrawing from your friends, especially now. It's very stressful. I know, especially as a senior, it's very hard. And like, you feel like you have so much on your plate that you can't even see your friends, you can't see your family. And it's just so easy to lock yourself in your room and be like, this is what I have to do. And like, even when your friends be like, oh, come on, hang out with me. It's just that always thought like, well, I have to do this, I have to do that. And especially when you like come from a first generation, like, as you're a first generation college student like I am, it's very easy to be like, well, this is like the expectations on me, so I have to have like these kind of grades, I have to show that I'm good at school, like I'm not struggling. And it's so easy to be like, okay, well, I can't hang out with my friends right now because school is most important. It's so easy to just like put off things that give you enjoyment for like your assignments and stuff like that.
And, you know, this is why it's important to have this conversation with the listeners, because Leah, you're a senior going in and you're feeling the pressure of all the things you're doing, and you're thinking, I can't hang out with my friends right now. You might not realize that it's been 2 weeks. For you, it's just, I'm in the middle of this. You know what I mean? You're so in the moment of what you're dealing with, which is important and valid. But sometimes that outside voice coming in is like, oh yeah, you know what? You're actually right. This is something. And so that's an important thing for the supporter to just talk about. Like we're talking about, you know, just have the conversation, because you might say something and somebody's like, you know what, you're right, I didn't realize. So that's a great indicator, is the withdrawing. But there's some others that you all mentioned. Jackie, you had a list that you gave me in particular of some things that if you're seeing these in your friends, it might be an indicator of something deeper.
Yeah. So talking about wanting to be dead, wanting to kill yourself, really feeling incredibly lonely. And this might have been because of the withdrawing, right? And it sort of all exacerbates that. Feeling empty and hopeless. Lack of hope is definitely a warning sign. Lack of any hope that the future could be better. Feeling like there's no options, that you're trapped, that you're stuck in your situation and nothing's going to help. Being in a lot of emotional and or physical pain, and saying goodbye to friends or family, sort of like wrapping up, you know, loose ends.
And of course, expressing explicit thoughts of suicide too, which, like, again, like Aaliyah said, sometimes it's like, oh, they're not serious, but it's like somebody says it, it's worth checking in,
especially if that's repeated.
Exactly.
That's kind of the one of the big indicators in that. And I've heard that, talk to people, and in my own personal past, I have some interaction with these things, and that repeated, it can be a real indicator of something going on.
Yeah. Also on like TikTok and stuff, it's like not exactly a joke, but it's like kind of a joke of like when your friend says, I love you. And like, it's like, oh no, I have to go talk to them now because they might commit suicide, or like something like that. Like, I see that a lot on TikTok now. Like, oh no, that friend, that's what they said. That friend texted you, I love you. So now I got to go talk to them. So like, it is a TikTok trend that might not be taken as seriously as it should be, because it is like a very prevalent thing in society now, especially in college students, and like the stress and responsibility that you have going on and feeling that you are alone.
Well, and you know, you mentioning that is something that, you know, I'm on a lot of TikTok. I have my own stuff I do there. but that's not something I'd seen, but you've seen it. And so you would notice that in your friends where I would not. And that's where it's important to be aware of because you know your friends better than other people. Like there are certain people I come in, and if that person walks in and they're quiet, they're just a quiet person. If that person walks in there quiet, something's seriously going on, because that's not who they are. And you know that better than anyone else who doesn't would.
And that's a great point, because it's nice to know the signs. I think, me and Jackie went to school for years to like learn these signs. So I know it can be a lot to say like, hey, I want you to remember all of these. But like, I think an easy way to think about it is just like, if you're noticing major different changes in your friend, if your friend used to be outgoing all the time, always the life of the party, but lately they haven't been going out, they've been trapped in their room lately, they haven't been talking to you, that's a change that you just want to notice, non-judgmentally. If your friend used to be kind of to themselves, but lately they've been acting out a lot, drinking more, things like that, you just want to notice it and notice like, hey, I've noticed this change. I'm wondering if, expressing concern, I'm concerned, and just kind of being honest about that and upfront and non-judgmental, it can go a long way. I feel like we're like, what to say? What's the right thing to say? A lot of times helping is a lot of listening and just kind of opening that door to non-judgmental listening and, actively showing them that like, hey, I'm with you.
And that's one of the things, Jackie, you mentioned that we're actually kind of hitting on, not specifically, but we are hitting on it, is the 5 action steps. We started off the 5 you mentioned in our prep. Was the first one was ask, and you talked about that, asking, and Leah, you talked about that, checking on your friends, things like that. The second one is keep them safe, and that's the non-judgmental, making sure that they're okay, checking in on them. But the third one was be there, and it's a bigger thing than we sometimes give credit to. That simply being there for somebody. We did a podcast on grief last year, and we talked about when someone's grieving, you don't know what to say. Sometimes just being there. My mom describes it as sitting in the ashes. If I came up upon somebody and their house had burned down, they were sitting there looking at the ashes of the house and just lamenting that, I don't know what to say. I don't have any answers, but I can sit with them in the ashes. And so being there can be a huge part of it, just knowing you're not alone, you're there. And that's a huge part of just being a supporter, is being that person. The fourth one we talked about, and this is the next step we want to get to, is help them connect. So we're talking about the resources and the way to help connect. And there's a couple. I actually want to ask you each some specific questions, but Jackie, I'm going to start with you. Just from a professional standpoint, McKinley Health Center, Counseling Center, that sort of thing. What's some advice you have for how students can help connect a friend who's struggling with the resources we have in those areas?
Yeah, great question. So if you want to help your friend get connected here on campus, you can call with them. You can literally take your phone, look up the number, dial for them, right? So part of just being there and supporting them is helping them, just make the call or walking over to our office, to the counseling center, to McKinley. Sometimes that getting started is the hardest part, like taking the first step. And so for you to walk them over here, for you to dial and, maybe get them to the right department and then hand them the phone, can really help them just take that first step to get connected.
And it's important. I do want to highlight that, on campus, mental health resources and meeting with counselors is very much in demand, and understandably so. And we as a campus are continually trying to make that more accessible and give more opportunity. But we have a limited staff with a massive amount of students. We have the most students on campus we've ever had. And so that can be difficult. And I know it can be difficult sometimes to get an appointment, but there's something that we have called ET. And both facilities have that. And that's something that, if you call or you walk in, you're saying, hey, this is what we're dealing with. We will have someone who will be able to meet with you or talk to you. At least it is not, you don't have to wait for an appointment for that. If you're, that's what ET is for. That's what it's there for. So I want to make sure if you're listening and you've heard, it's hard to get an appointment. It is not always easy to get an appointment, but there are options, and it's not going to be just you're on your own.
So to your point, Matt, it's important that when you're helping your friend get connected, that, they express what's going on, right? So don't tell us like, oh, you're just not feeling so great and you need an appointment. Like, say, I'm having suicidal thoughts. I'm having thoughts about wanting to die. I'm having a hard time getting through the day. I, feel like I want to be dead. when you're telling us that it's to that level, we are going to make sure that you get to talk to someone so that you can get some help that day.
That brings me to another point another part of it that I want to talk to Chris and ask him specifically, because we're talking about, ET at the facility, but the counseling center has a suicide prevention outreach team, and you're the co-chair on that. So, I mean, what does that mean? I mean, an outreach team generally means, you're going out and talking to people, but how does that function, and what do students need to know about that particular group?
Yeah, well, with the outreach team, it's part of many outreach teams that the counseling center has. It's just a way that we, at the center, we call it comprehensive counseling center. We believe that, one of the best ways to make sure students are coming to the center is us going out to the students and letting them know that we're here. So part of suicide prevention outreach team's goal is to talk to students around campus about suicide prevention, even talk to staff, like advisors, teaching them how to kind of help students around, like suicide prevention, how they can recognize the signs and know when to kind of reach out to a student. That's kind of the goal, and then, as well as making sure that we are, working with because counseling center has like other outreach teams. We make sure we work with all of our outreach teams in the center, so that we're hitting as many populations as possible. For suicide prevention, we hit the the Bruce Nesbitt African American Culture Center, the Asian American Culture Center. We have something planned for the Gender and Sexuality Resource Center. It's really important that we are getting this message out there to as many students as possible, and that those students are reaching out to their communities and talking about it too, so that they know that services are available.
And if you're listening, you're curious about, when those teams will be where or how to get connected with that team, or just have questions, we'll have the contact information in our bio. But if nothing else, contact the counseling center and say, hey, I just want to know about the suicide prevention outreach team, and they'll be happy to help you.
They can even make a workshop on request online. If you have a student group or something, you want the counseling center to come and talk to you all about suicide prevention, a fraternity or anything, a sorority, anything like that, any sort of student group, it's free for students to request a workshop on request. All we need is 2 weeks notice. You need to provide the space and the audience, and we'll come with the presentation. So that's definitely something all students can check out. If you go on our website and click on our outreach tab, you should be able to find the workshop on request form.
And again, we want to help. The people here on campus who do these things are because we care about students. That's why we're here. That's why we're part of this population, is because we're invested in students and their journeys and helping them be the best that they can possibly be. And Aaliyah, I want to ask you too, you're a counseling center paraprofessional. Let's say we have a student that wants to talk to somebody. They're not quite ready to talk to a counselor, but they want to talk to somebody, and they might feel more comfortable talking to students. Are there options there for them?
Yeah, so with the counseling center paraprofessional, we do tabling, so you can go to the table and talk to us. And then, just like Chris says, we do workshops and requests, so that might be a counseling center paraprofessional. I do have to say that we're not a professional, so therefore we cannot give you the help that a professional can. But if you come to us and you tell us what's going on, we can direct you to those services. We can tell you how to get in touch with the counseling center. We can tell you all the information that you need, and that we can just be there to help you get the resources that you need.
And every Tuesday at 7 p.m., the CCPs are doing a presentation out on campus. So every Tuesday at 7 p.m., there's a different topic that our paraprofessionals are kind of doing an outreach on, and that's definitely a great way to connect with them too.
We have Tuesday at 7 workshops. So we are doing some flyers. Some people might give you a flyer for it. You might find it around campus, but it's on different topics. I think we just had one about anxiety. We're going to be talking about burnout. We have one coming up about imposter phenomenon. I have one about body image. So we do have Tuesday at 7 workshops for people to come in and listen to us talk about these subjects, and even participate and have the discussion about these subjects in college students.
And I think it's important too, because we're talking about anxiety. Yes, this is suicide prevention, but she mentioned anxiety. She mentioned burnout. It doesn't have to part of suicide prevention is knowing that you can come talk to us before it gets to suicide, before it gets to suicidal thoughts. Just calling at 7:50 at the counseling center to get a same day appointment is, if you're feeling down, if you're having struggling in class, if you're having problems managing your anxiety, is a way to kind of manage things before they turn into something more serious, like suicidal thoughts. So I think that's very important.
It's kind of like what Jack and I were talking about before we started recording, is that very few things happen in a vacuum. Very few things are very cut and dry that this is only this particular idea. It doesn't relate to anything else. That never happens. There's so many things in our lives, in our studies, in our emotions, in our mental and physical health that are tied to each other. I mean, mental and physical health are tied to each other. Your mental health affects how your body feels, and your body affects how you think about yourself. There's so much that cross the lines that blur, and so it's important to recognize that, like Chris said, that you can talk about things that might not be to the point of suicidal thoughts, but you're starting to feel a lot of anxiety, and you're starting feeling a little bit of a snowball, and you're not sure what to do with that. Come talk to somebody. It's really important to have these discussions. Conversation takes away so much stigma, and sometimes, for me personally, sometimes when I'm feeling something really strongly and I'm struggling with it, just saying it out loud and hearing the words can be a huge thing for me, because it's part of my process. If you see me in my office walking around with a football in my hands talking, I'm processing through something. That's I know that of myself now. I've learned that, and that's something that's important. So just talking about it is a big deal. Before we run out of time, because we could go forever on this topic. We're all very passionate about it. It's very in-depth. It's a very broad topic. We could do that. But I do want to highlight one more thing, because we do live in a technological age, and we live in an age that sometimes the only time between classes or between studies, the only thing you have time for is to pick up your phone or your smart device or whatever it may be and go to a website or an app or something like that. And Chris, you had mentioned in the prep Cognito, and that's with a K, Kognito, Cognito, as a resource. What is that?
So Cognito is a suicide prevention program. It's an online suicide prevention program. It's virtual. You do need at least a laptop or a computer to work it. I don't think you can do it on your smartphone quite yet, but it's a great program. I get the question, like, how do you practice this? Unless you're like gonna go to school for it, like me and Jackie. There's ways to kind of practice it without that, and Cognito is how you do that. It's a pretty much you have it's like a simulated program where you have a group of students, or a group of friends, might I say, they are showing different signs, signs of distress. They go over kind of like, different scenarios, like a lunchroom scenario where you're at a party. And it kind of goes over like, hey, here's the situation with these friends. Here's the things to look out for. Which friend would you like to reach out to? Because they might be struggling a little bit. Once you reach out to that friend, it goes over how to have that conversation. What are some of the things to ask? What are some of the same things not to ask? I literally say you can answer the question wrong on purpose just to get an explanation of why that isn't the best thing to say. It really kind of goes through everything really well and really detailed. And at the end of it, you get some resources about some campus resources that you can refer your friends to, and a certificate too. So it's a research-driven program. And it's something that it's free for students to take. I encourage every student to take it. All you need to do to sign in is your net ID and password. You can find it on the Counseling Center website if you click the emergency tab.
So again, I just really wanted to highlight that, because it is something that students or listeners, anyone, may not be aware of. And so I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to plug that. Time flies when you're talking about something you're passionate about. It does. And I really appreciate the conversation, the honest conversation, the authentic conversation that we've had today. And so Jackie, Chris, Aaliyah, thank you so much for being a part of this today. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sometimes the most important key for any topic, and especially with something with stigma, is just to talk about it, to have the conversation. And so if you're listening today and you've heard something that you want to know more about, please reach out to the resources we have in the bio. Ask questions. We're happy to engage with you. We want to continue the conversation. We want to make it so that both the person feeling the feelings and the person listening are comfortable with having that conversation. So reach out. Whether it's the Counseling Center, McKinley Health Center, here at Healthy Illini, just feel free to reach out if you have whatever the situation may be. We want to continue that conversation with you. But thank you for joining us today. You are on a personal journey no matter where you are in it. You are important, you matter. Your health and wellness are important and matter, and we're here to keep you well to excel. So go have a great week, Illini. Let us know how you're doing, and we'll catch you next time on Healthy.